here's what's interesting. This movie, when it was first made, we created a parallel universe. We didn't mention other rock bands. It was like this own reality that we had created for them. But over the years, it entered the real world because not only, they're all great musicians, they all play, but they started getting gigs. And real musicians would play with them. So it became a different, like a hybrid reality. And everybody that would come up to us, rockers, would say, I had my Spinal Tap moment.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, the band gets back together in director Rob Reiner's mockumentary, Spinal Tap II, The End Continues. This follow-up to the 1984 feature This Is Spinal Tap finds a documentarian once again shadowing the bandmates of Spinal Tap as they reunite after 15 years to put on one final show. In addition to Spinal Tap II and This Is Spinal Tap, Reiner's other directorial credits include the feature films Shock and Awe, The Princess Bride, Misery, and LBJ, and the documentary Albert Brooks' Defending My Life. He is a 3-time nominee for the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film for 1986's Stand By Me, 1989's When Harry Met Sally, and 1992's A Few Good Men. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Reiner spoke with director Paul Feig about filming Spinal Tap II, The End Continues. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Thank you very much. That's very sweet. That's it. You didn't have to get up and stretch. It's not that long a movie. Only 83 minutes.
I know it's a tight watch.
It's a tight. It seems like the first one was 83 minutes. This one's 83. It seems like this is the length that you're supposed to have for these movies. I don't know. Yeah.
Wow, the first one's 83 minutes.
83 minutes.
I've watched so many of the extended ones now.
Yeah. Everything's long now. I think. I remember watching. I read this a long time ago. There was a biography, an autobiography by Frank Capra. Frank Capra, who, great director. And he said something in it I'll never forget, which is, at the time, now people don't go to the movies so much anymore. I'm hoping that they'll go to your movie. I know they'll go to that. But no, a lot of people, they'll only go to, if it's a superhero or it's a horror thing or whatever. But when I started making a movie, he said that, you're asking people to pay money to sit in a darkened room with strangers for 2 hours. You better put something up there that's worth watching. And so I always took that into my head. I thought, give them something that they can watch and they can enjoy, and don't overstay your welcome. That's my feeling.
Well, because there's so much improv, and I want to get into that later, but how do you chop that down to 83? I've been involved in those too, and masses of stuff.
Well, it's difficult. We shot the first one and this one like a documentary. There's no script. We have, basic story, idea of where we're going, but all the dialogue is improvised. All of the dialogue is improvised. So what I learned in the first one, and this was something that was taught to me by the film editor, was Bob Layton, who I worked with on many, many films, and I hired him because he had been a BBC documentarian, filmmaker, and so I worked with him, and he said, "Here's the trick: take the dialogue and see if it tracks and stitch it together," because we would do a couple of takes and they wouldn't say the same things. And, it's not like a script where you have lines they're going to say. They would improvise, and sometimes the second take would be completely new stuff and funny stuff. And Chris never could remember what he said the first time anyway, so he would say the thing. So he said, if you can stitch the dialogue together in a way that makes sense and that people listening to it think you're listening to a conversation, that will make it work. Don't worry about the visuals as much as the audio. The audio, if it jumps, that'll throw you out of the picture. But if you can get the audio right, you can cut to any kind of visual. And sometimes we have big jokes that were set off stage that I didn't have any coverage on because I would say to Peter Smokler, who was shot the first one, I say, shoot just people talking in the first couple of times. The third time through, just people who are not talking. It's like, reinventing the wheel. It's coverage. It's called coverage. And so I would do that. But many times there would be a great joke told off camera. But as long as you could stitch it together, you could make it work. And then you would find, because like you say, there's tons and tons of footage you shoot, and some stuff, is much as you love it and it's hysterical and all that stuff, you say, gee, it doesn't really fit in the arc of it. The rhythm of this thing is not working. We're sticking. And I'll give you a perfect example. I don't know how many people saw the first movie, the one week. Okay, good. Good.
You better all have seen it.
No, because a lot of young people, they didn't see it, or people did. And we had screenings where we had half the audience who had seen the first one and the other half hadn't. And we had to make sure that the thing stood on its own. And if you hadn't seen the first one, it would still work. So that's okay. But in the first one, if you saw it, there's a scene where you see Nigel Tufnell, played by Chris Guest, and David St. Hubbins by Michael McKean. And there's a scene where they're getting their album. Then they're not going to stock it because it's called Smell the Glove. And the girl is on all fours and she's got naked and she's getting a thing and it's sexist. And one guy says, what's wrong with being sexy? He says, no, not sexy. It's sexist. And so you see the two of them. They both have herpes sores on their lips. And people laugh at it. And when they first did it, I said, what are they laughing at? They're just two guys with her. Here was the setup for that. At one point, we had an act opening for the band. It was a punk act called The Dose. And the lead singer was Cherie Currie. You remember Cherie Currie? She was in The Runaways. It was with Joan Jett. And so she was the opening act, and we see her, and then we see Nigel canoodling with her, and then kissing and whatever. And the next scene, he's got a herpes sore. And then the next thing, she's with David, and then he has a herpes sore. And she makes her way around the band, and then there's a band meeting where they all sit around, and there's 5 of them. 4 of them have herpes sores, and the drummer's the only guy with no herpes sore, and they're voting whether or not they want to drop the Dose from the tour. And they all say, yeah, well, I don't think it. And he says, no, I think they're good. We should keep them. He's the only one without the sore. So that took a long time to tell, and so we had to cut the whole thing, and what's left is 2 guys with sores. But people laugh at it anyway. I don't know why.
It tells the story. I mean, it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, just to dive a little deeper though into saying no script, but like, what is the process? I'm so fascinated. Like, how much of an outline do you do?
Yeah. Well, we had a little bit of an outline. I mean, in the first one, it was a tour of the United States. We mapped out where they would go. In the second one, it's the one concert. They do the one concert, but it's all about they're reuniting after 15 years of not talking to each other. So we have scenes that we know are going to be built in there, and it's the rehearsals and what happens during rehearsals and building up to the concert. So we know a basic arc of the thing. But what we did was, and like I say, all the dialogue's improvised. So we would have ideas for scenes. For instance, the scene you see with Paul McCartney came out of a real thing that happened to the Spinal Tap guys. They were rehearsing at a place in the Valley for their tour. Paul McCartney was next door rehearsing for his tour, and he dropped in one day and said, hey, fellas, give us a tune. And that came out of that scene. So we put, okay, that makes sense, the rehearsing. But what we would do is we'd have a big bulletin board. If we had an idea for a scene that we thought would service this general idea, we'd say, what about this? And we'd put it up on a card up on the board. Now, the first film, Harry Shearer who plays Derek, he was going with a woman who worked at ABC News. And so there was, I don't know if it's anybody old enough to remember, there was a news broadcaster's name was Roger Grimsby. Do you remember that guy, Roger Grimsby? Anyway, he was a guy who was broadcasting for ABC News, and he had a whole bunch of cards that were like promotional cards. It had his picture on the front, and on the back it was empty. And so and we had this big stack of cards. So if we came up with an idea, we thought, ooh, that could work in the film, we'd say to each other, do you think that scene deserves a Grimsby? Does it merit a Grimsby? So we put the Grimsby up on the board. And the second movie, we did the same thing. Roger Grimsby had passed away, but Michael McKean found a picture of him on the internet, had cards made up, and so we had the Grimsbys there too. So we had, we would have scenes, and sometimes, the scene would make it into the film, sometimes it didn't.
But I'm curious about, like, in the first one, you have a really nice arc of the kind of the Yoko storyline, and then the really nice kind of getting over that. Right. Is that hard baked into there too?
Well, here's what's tricky, and because you've done a lot of satire, you understand that. But satire and emotion, they don't like each other. They don't want to play with the same. They fight each other. But my feeling was always that if you have just a straight satire, like The Ruddles was a straight satire. I don't know if you saw that. It was specifically about the Beatles. But if you don't have some emotional something in there, it becomes not so satisfying. And I always felt that you had to have that. So we looked at the classic, rock and roll trope, which is the two guys who are buddies, Lennon and McCartney, whatever. And these two guys knew each other from the time they were little kids in London, and the woman that comes between them and how it affects their creativity. So that was the thing we put in the first one. And I only touched on it a little bit because I wanted to weave it in as best I could without destroying the humor of it and the satire. The second one is a little bit more than we had in the first one because, as you know, when you get older, things, whatever it is that was getting to you gets to you a little bit more. And so they were holding on to a lot of these feelings, and it comes out with David accusing him of sleeping with his, at the time, wife. So I amped up the emotion a little bit more, but I think hopefully we kept it, in check so it doesn't overshadow the rest.
I think it's great.
It's a balance. It's like in Princess Bride. That's the craziest balance of all. And Bill Goldman used to say it all the time. He said, it's like an oddball movie. He said, what is it? It's a satire because, how often do you hear a line like, never get involved in a land war in Asia? In the same movie as there's swashbuckling and there's a love story. So it's got all this stuff in it. And so you have to find a way to just kind of, weave it together.
Well, let's talk filmmaking of this because now, how many cameras do you use at any one time? Are you cross-shooting a lot?
Well, in the first one, we only had one camera.
Oh, really?
And we only had one camera, and it was a 16 millimeter film camera. And the second one, it's shot digitally, and there's two cameras, and which makes it, in one way, easier because you can do it. You get reactions and dial. But the camera people would always say, "Oh, I want to make sure I get how do we want to stage this?" And I would say to them, "No, there's no staging. I don't stage anything. It's got to be whatever evolves in the scene." And they said, "Well, yeah, but I will be in the shot." I said, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's like we're making a documentary." I said, "You can't make a mistake. If the guy's in the back, you'll see in one shot when I think she comes in and says Questlove is on the Zoom, and you see the other guys running in the back, because they were in another scene. We were doing another scene. They came back in there. I said, it's okay if you see other cameras or you see the boom guy, whatever. It's all okay because we're saying it's a cinema verite. It's the way it's supposed to be. So the two cameras to me was a helpful, and but even to the end, the guys were saying, "No, but I'm in the other guy's shot." I said, "Don't worry about it. It's okay to be in the other guy. We can remind people that it's a documentary."
Everyone's so afraid of getting fired.
I know. It's so funny. It's funny. Well, I used to joke about this. In these movies, you can't do it. Like in Misery, somebody would say, there's a grip stand in that shot, you know? Now, in those movies, you can't really have it, but I say, oh, it's okay because you'll remind people it's only a movie. Don't get too, I make the joke, but I mean, you know, in those you can't have the grip stand there. Yeah.
Before you could just paint everything out.
Yeah. Now you can paint everything out.
I know.
You couldn't, in those days, you couldn't paint.
So how is, I mean, you know, you got Paul McCartney, like you said, but how was the process of getting Paul and Sir Elton in it, and how were they with improv?
They were great. They loved it. They took to it. Here's what's interesting. This movie, when it was first made, we created a parallel universe. It was not, we didn't mention other rock bands. It was like this own reality that we had created for them. But over the years, it entered the real world because not only, I mean, they're all great musicians. They all play. There's not one note in this movie or the first one where it's not them playing and exactly recorded live, no playback, no tracks, nothing. It's them live. So, and they started getting gigs. They got gigs. They played Wembley Stadium, they played Royal Albert Hall and Glastonbury and then Carnegie Hall, and real musicians would play with them. They like to play with them because they can play. Like Elton John says, you know, you don't find heavy metal bands with a guy who can play the mandolin, and Chris can do that. So it became a different, like a hybrid reality. And everybody that would come up to us, rockers would say, I had my Spinal Tap moment. This happened to me. This happened to me. And I wrote this book that's out right now called A Fine Line Between Stupid and Clever. And it was my favorite line from the first movie. And we have a bunch of rockers, Don Henley and Slash and a few others, talking about their Spinal Tap moments. So they all relate to it. They all dig it and they get what this is and they all want to be part of the joke. So when I call Paul McCartney up, and by the way, the scene in there is exactly what happened. Paul McCartney walked in there and said, you know, he was rehearsing next door. And he says, hey, let me have a tune. That came out of a real place. They all wanted to be part of it. They all dug the film. They dug the guys and they met them before. So they all wanted to be part of it. That was easy. The hard part was resisting too many famous rock stars, seriously, because then it becomes like stunt casting. You know, it's not. You want to have something that has an integrity to it and makes sense. So we had Elton John wanted to perform with them, and so that's what we did. So you know,
that's amazing. And where did the drummer? Because she's an amazing drummer,
yeah,
but she's also super funny.
Yeah. Well, she again, you know, I didn't know if she could improvise or anything, and I didn't know how much I would use, you know, because I interview them all in different ways. And if it's no good and it's not serving the piece, I get rid of it. I don't do it. But she came in and auditioned and just kicked ass. I mean, she was unbelievable. And we didn't think it was going to be a woman or a man. We didn't know. We just wanted to get a good drummer. And she came in and was the best. And we said, yeah, let's go there. And that's a big theme for Spinal Tap, finding drummers, you know, they go pretty quick, you know. And that's why those guys, they didn't want to do it because they didn't want to die. And so I said, well, that'll be your thing. I'll ask you about, you know, we'll talk about how do you feel about being the latest drummer? So she did what she did, and they all improvised.
That's amazing. Yeah. How long was the shoot, and where did you shoot?
We shot in New Orleans, just like it says, you know, at the Lakefront Arena, exactly where we said. It's a really cool place. It seats about 11,000 people, and we shot for pretty much the same. It would have been more if I only had one camera, but we shot, I think, like 25 days, which is the same. The first one was about 25 days.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So that concert was, did you actually just say Spinal Tap's going to be in concert?
Yeah. And
so that's all real.
You know, that is real. The weirdest thing, Paul, because you know when you hire a bunch of extras, you get people, you're hiring them and they're paid to come and be however. And so sometimes, you know, they're not going to. These people all wanted to be there. They wanted to watch the Spinal Tap concert. And so they were totally into it and they loved it. And it helped the guys on stage because it was like performing in front of a real crowd. And it was, you know, the energy was there. We didn't have that the first time. I only had, I had one day where I had like 600 people, but most of the time I had 50 or 60 people. And what those tricks where you put the camera in the back and you put some people in the foreground, and then you don't see that there's 1,000 empty seats, and then there's a couple of people in front of the stage, so it looks like there's a lot. But this time we didn't have to worry about that too much.
And it was like, how many days was that? Or was it kind of just an extended concert?
Well, we did the concert part, we shot in one day. And it was good because we were only in the one location. And like in the first one, they're going from city to city. So we shot in, I think, 5 or 6 locations, all in LA. And it was like an 18-hour day. It was crazy because we would go from, it was like, like roadies. They pack up the place, they go to the next place, and we do another thing. And I had 3 cameras there, so I would shoot it 3 times, and I had 9 angles. This time I had 5 cameras, so I shot it twice, and I had 10 angles, and that was enough. And we had a great lighting guy who had lit all these rock concerts, and he knew how to do. We previewed all the lighting. So I shot each song twice, and we did that in one day.
That's amazing. Well, that keeps that energy great.
Yeah.
So I mean, 41 years later, why was now the time to do it? Had you talked about doing this in years past?
It was never the time. It was never the time. No, people would come up to us all the time and say, "You should do a sequel. You should do." We said, "No. We did it. And then over the years, it got in the Library of Congress, put it in the National Film Registry, and This Goes to 11 became in the Oxford English Dictionary and everything. And so we said, no, the bar's too high, forget it. And we didn't want to do it. We said, no, we don't want to do it. And here's the truth, and this is the honest to God truth. We made no money from this, the first one, nothing. And maybe some of you'll appreciate this, but the 4 of us had 40% of the profits, which we had 10% apiece. And over the years, between the foreign sales and DVDs and videos and Blu-rays, whatever, each of us, I'm not exaggerating, it's going to sound like a joke, we each made 82 cents. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. It's like, they say net profits. There's not profits. It's like there's a lot of, creative accounting. Anyway, Harry Shearer, God love him, he took it upon himself. He said, this is not fair. This is not right. I mean, this movie's been going, they have in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even though they won't let Spinal Tap in, they sell merch of Spinal Tap. Hello, Cleveland, and all this stuff. So he sued, and there were like 4 or 5 different owners that owned different rights, and he sued them all. And over about 3 or 4 year period, he got the rights back. And this is about 2-3 years ago. He gets the rights back, and we said, "Well, now what do we do with this? We got these rights." So we got together, we sat down, and we said, should we do this?" And first we said, no, we did it. But then we met again, and we said, wait a minute, what about this? And it came out of a very natural place, and that's what led us to do it. The guys themselves had not played in 15 years. And I said, well, what is that about? Why not? Are they not talking? Is there bad blood? And we started chatting about that. Then we thought, well, because we thought they're old now, and I said, but wait a minute, the Rolling Stones are out there, the Eagles are out there. We saw, Oasis just got back together, and I saw, where Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend, The Who, and I said, it's a thing where these older people are still going out and they still have their fans. And he said, but then why would they do this? I mean, what reason? They haven't played in 15 years. Who's going to come? And we came up with this idea, and this was based on something we remembered hearing about Kate Bush. Remember Kate Bush? She did a song that was on Stranger Things. And it was a song that was dead, and all of a sudden it went way up. It was all of a sudden a big hit. So we said, wait a minute. The daughter of Ian Faith, who was their manager, who had passed away, the real guy, Tony Hendra, had passed away, and she had this contract that she inherited that called for one more performance, but it's not worth anything. They haven't played. But then all of a sudden we thought, wait a minute, what if some big music star, and we get Garth Brooks, who agreed to do it with Trisha Yearwood, is screwing around a rehearsal. Somebody catches it on an iPhone. They put it up on TikTok, goes viral, and all of a sudden they mean something again. That became a natural thing that came out of something that we found. So we put all that together and said, okay, this hopefully will stand on its own.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So just to go, so Rob, yes. Thank you for doing it, by the way.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. Oh my God, so much fun.
Yeah.
So you've made some of the greatest movies of all time.
That's
some of the
what you
biggest
say.
hits of all time.
Thank you.
I mean, it's one of those crazy lists where you're like, oh yeah, oh wait, he did that, and he did that, and you know, comedy and drama and all that stuff. I just want, like, what has been your process in your whole career of picking projects? What did you look for? What you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I after I did Spinal Tap, and then I because it was hard to get that made. I mean, people at that time, if you were in television, you know, you were looked down upon by the people in the movie industry. You were like lowlife, and they were a royalty. So I was lucky. I got that done, and I love satire and improv. I came from that world, and there was a big cross-pollination between the music world and the improv world. Janis Joplin used to come up on stage with us. We knew all these people, and so that felt very natural to me. But then they let me do this movie, The Sure Thing, because it was the same woman who spearheaded Spinal Tap let me do it. So, but then after that, it was like, okay, now I want to do the things I want to do that are more reflective of me. So I try to find a way into the story. If I could tell a story through something of my sensibility, and like in Stand By Me, it was like the boy Gordy, who was not the main character in the book. He was just one of four. He was an observer. And I started thinking about my own feelings and how I felt about how my dad felt about me, and how this character, I thought, thinks about his father thinking about him and all this stuff. And I said, okay, if that's the thing, I can tell this story. And it's also placed in 1959 when I was 12 and I had 3 friends, and all of that stuff made sense to me. And so I always try to find my way into the story. And they said, well, how do you find your way into something like Misery? And I said, well, it's not something I would normally do, a thriller, a horror thriller. I wouldn't do it. But I remember the time when I left All in the Family, and nobody would say, you can direct a movie. You know, it wasn't a thing. And so I wanted to do that. And I see the character in there, this guy, Paul Sheldon, who's written a certain thing, because they asked me, do you want to continue doing the character with Sally Struthers? We have a spinoff. And they threw a ton of money at me to do that. But I didn't want it. I wanted to do the things I wanted to do. And so I saw this character as somebody who had written this one thing that the public loved. They loved these Misery characters, Misery Chastain, but he so badly wanted to do something different, which is Stephen King has written things under a different name because he has that same feeling. And this book meant a lot to him because it was something that he wrestles with. And I understood that. I understood what that felt like. And the idea that if you did something that somebody didn't expect you to do or didn't want you to do, they'd get mad at you and they would abandon you. And in this case, they would kill you if they didn't like it. So I could get that. And same thing with Few Good Men. I thought, here's a character who never went into a courtroom, who had a father who was a famous trial lawyer who had been in courtrooms and people knew, and there was this guy who only plea bargained. And I said, okay, that's my way in. To living up to a famous father, and that was my way into that story. So I try to find ways into the thing because I don't know how to tell the story otherwise. You know, I was raised in a household which was very politically active. You know, people talk about where they were when Kennedy was shot. I distinctly remember that. But I also remember where I was when Medgar Evers was shot, which was, 6 months before Kennedy. And we were talked about that in our household. So when I saw this story about a white guy, and I got criticized for how could you tell a story about Medgar Evers? You're white and you shouldn't be. I said, well, I understand that feeling of wanting to put the guy behind bars who killed Medgar Evers, because these are the things were talked about in my house. And when I went to visit, we shot at the actual place where Medgar Evers was killed in his driveway. And we shot it there. And I stood on the driveway, and I had 2 kids at the time. I have 3 now. He had 3 kids, and I'm starting to cry because being taken away from your family. I know what that feels. So I wanted to tell that story. It was my way of how could I tell a story? I can't tell the story of Medgar Evers. I don't know what that feels like, but I know what it feels like if you're a white person and you want to right a wrong. I do know what that feels like. So I could tell that story. And I try to approach everything like that. Yeah.
That's good. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, because I've really been inspired. I'm so inspired by Howard Hawks, who jumped genres all the time. I've been so inspired by you, who jumped genres all the time. And I really worked my career from one of Fellini's apparently last things he said in his life was, "I wish I'd made more movies."
Right.
And and I think there's something to that, because especially, we probably do a lot of writing on our movies.
I do a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. But at the same time, I think we've escaped from that thing of I have to be the writer, director of everything, because then you don't get to make as many movies.
No. And the other thing is, I always find that, it's a collaborative effort. There's no way to get around it. And anybody who has a good idea, if it serves the thing the story you're trying to tell, I don't care if it comes from another actor, from a grip, a prop person. I don't care where it comes from, because if it serves the picture and it serves the story, put it in there. And it's not important to me. The story has to, and the idea has to trump. I don't know where they're trump everything. There you go. Vault. Don't get me started.
Go over the top of.
Don't get me started on that one. Yeah.
No, somebody once said to me that take every idea, because you still get credit for all their ideas.
It's true. It's true. They'll because ultimately you have to make the decision whether it's in the film or not in the film.
Yeah.
And so it does. The buck stops with you. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Rob, I've been told we're out of time. Yeah. But thanks everybody. The amazing,
thank you so much.
The legend, the man.
Thank you very much,
Rob Reiner.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.